We are now going to look at the reasons why we need to put different organisms in different classes, which is called classification. One of the reasons why we put different organisms in different classes, or the reason why we carry out classification, or what we can call the benefits of classification, or the importance of classification, or the grouping of organisms in their respective classes and groups. One of them is to help us to understand the behaviors of those organisms. It is very easy for us to know the behavior of the organisms when we have put them in a particular group. Secondly, another advantage is to help scientists, biologists, to pass on information from one place to another. For example, a biologist in China will have the same information like a biologist in Africa and worldwide if organisms are put in their respective groups. Then there is also the need for us to understand the origin of the organism. So if the organisms are put in their own groups, in their respective groups, it will help us to understand their origin by looking at their ancestral line, looking at the differences and the resemblance of these organisms and the new species that are evolving. And then it also helps us to understand the newly discovered species. If there are new species that are arising, it is easier for us to understand the origin of those species. Those are some of the importances of grouping organisms into the different groups. To understand their lineage, to put them into a group which can help biologists to pass over information which is the same exact information worldwide, and it eases the studying of these organisms. Now, how do we group these organisms in their respective groups? The grouping of organisms into their respective groups is what we call taxonomy or classification. Organisms are grouped depending on their resemblance and the differences. So you look at the characteristics of these organisms, how they resemble each other, and what the differences they have. Then you group them depending on their differences and their similarities. Now, this grouping does not only depend on the physical or the outside look appearance of the organism. It may also depend on other life processes like the physiology, the functioning of the internal organs of the organism. We may look at the chemicals, production of chemicals by these organisms, and many other aspects are used when we are grouping these organisms. Now you'll find that these organisms are grouped into kingdoms. Like we said that under living things, we have two divisions. And those two divisions are what we refer to as kingdoms. We have the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom. Those are the two divisions. That one now means that we have started now the process of classification, or the process of grouping organisms into their respective groups. At first we have living things. Now from living things, we are coming down, putting them into two groups. And those two groups are animal kingdom and plant kingdom. Then, when we get one kingdom, we can further subdivide that kingdom into phyla or into phylum. From kingdom, we get phyla. Then, when we get the phylum, one phylum can be classified or subdivided into classes. So, one kingdom is subdivided into phylas, and then the phyla, one phylum is subdivided into different classes. Then the classes, we can further go on subdividing them into families. When you get one family, you can continue to subdivide that family into many orders. Then from the orders, we can pick one order and subdivide that order into genera. The genera, we can pick out one genus and subdivide it into species. Now, when we come to this bottom of the species from the genus, species, these are organisms which are grouped together that can interbreed and produce a viable offspring. We started from the kingdom, came to the phyla, we came to the class, we came to the order, we came to the families, we came to the genus, and then we came to the species. And we are saying that a species is a group of organisms that can interbreed and produce viable offsprings. And genus is a group of organisms which shows resemblance. For example, man and gorillas, they resemble. That is a genus. But when we go down and divide them into species, we shall get only human beings and the gorillas. Human beings can interbreed and produce viable offsprings, whereas gorillas also can interbreed with gorillas to produce viable offspring. Therefore, those ones are now at the species levels. Now, after grouping them, we give them names. The names that we are giving these animals, they come from two. They come from the genus and they come from the species. The genus and the species. And this is what we refer to as the binomial system of naming of organisms. So we have looked at the importance of classifying organisms. And we have also looked at the way we classify organisms. We said we start with the living things, and then we get the kingdoms, we get the phyla, we get the classes, we get the orders, we get the families, genus, and then the species. And we have said that the genus is a group of organisms which show resemblance, whereas the species is the group of organisms that can interbreed and produce viable offsprings. And when we are giving names, we use the genus and a species to form a binomial naming of the organism. Examples that we can give is the name given to human beings, which is Homo sapien. The Homo is the genus and sapien is the species. So, next time when we come, we shall look at the different kingdoms, which is the classification of organisms. Thank you.